So, as you know, Lisa's book, The Leavers, won the 2016 Penn Bellwether Award, which is the social justice award, and it concerns themes of immigration, detention, undocumented identity, and Asian adoption, all things that we've done a lot of things on. And when I emailed Lisa, I said, you know, we've worked with a lot of groups in the undocumented movement, we've done a lot of events on Korean adoption, how do you want to go with this event? And she said, all that stuff is really cool, but what I really want to talk about is Asians who are really fucked up. So here's where we are tonight. So we have two short readings that are about Asian dropouts. And you can think about your favorite Asian dropout stories and save them for the Q&A. And then Lisa will read and talk about The Leavers with Zohra Saed. So our two readers, first will be Ed Lin, who's the author of Waylaid, itself an Asian American dropout story, as well as two series. One is the Robert Chow mystery set in 1970s Chinatown. That series is actually going to be reissued this year through an imprint called Witness Impulse. And also the Taipei mystery series set in contemporary Taipei, published by Soho, and that includes Incense and Ghost Market. He's also the winner of 3 Asian American Literary Awards, which is the award we give out, which might be a record. And he'll be followed with Jade Sharma, who's the author of Problems by Coffee House Press. The New York Times says that it's a deeply and powerfully feminist work whose voice is crude, unsettling, and often shamelessly sexy. So let's give them both a hand.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. Well, it's 2017, and this marks my 25th year as a member of the Asian American Writers Workshop. So for most of my life, I've been a member. And I really hope that some of you are considering that as well, because it's a wonderful thing to have. It really is. And I met Lisa at the Writers Workshop like 2 decades ago, dude. We both took this class from Jhumpa Lahiri. All right. Well, okay, this isn't strictly like a dropout story, but you don't have to be a dropout to be an underachiever, a loser. You know, you can be the president of the United States and be a fucking loser. Any opinions that I express are those of the Asian American Writers Workshop. Okay, so I became a father about 4 years ago, and since then I've been writing these short stories and giving them boys' names. And this is the latest one in that series, and it's called Steve. Near the end of winter break, close to midnight, I sorta hooked up with my roommate's girlfriend. I say sorta because we only got so far before she said she would feel less guilty if we were both on something. We didn't have any booze, and the rich undergrads who handed us weed instead of essays were gone. I looked around the kitchen. The fridge was stocked with uncovered and hardening cheese, meat, and fruit scavenged from the poorly publicized department holiday party. It was actually at that party where the girlfriend had showed strong interest in me. I had been buzzed and she was drunk. We were both sitting on a bench stuffing food into our Tupperware when she hit on me in that passive way that women do. "I've never fucked an Asian guy before," she sounded out slowly. And just to be a dick, because I get so few opportunities to be one, I said, "Neither have I." On top of the microwave, I saw the bunch of bananas I swiped from the faculty lounge in a new light. They were originally my backup plan for a week of loose meals. Now they were going to get us high. I remembered that in middle school, a cop came in and warned us that by baking banana peels, you could make something that was close to magic mushrooms. I've always had something better, so I never tried it before. I would have looked up how specifically to do it, but we didn't have Wi-Fi in the apartment, and I was already way over my data limit on my phone plan. The girlfriend was in the same banana boat. We decided to wing it. We peeled all 7 bananas and laid them out on a baking sheet. A frozen pizza was 10 minutes at 425. A banana probably be half that. 10 minutes at 200. She started eating the bananas. We shouldn't just waste them, she said. She held one out to me. I don't really like bananas, I said. I have to eat them with ketchup, and I was going to go out to Shake Shack later to get some. She shrugged and kept eating. I was amazed when she finished the 4th banana and became concerned after the 5th. Will you still kiss me if I have banana breath? She asked. We don't have to kiss, I said. She blinked. I have to go to the bathroom. You know where it is. She bolted. I gingerly washed my hands at the kitchen sink, which gave only scalding hot water. The smell coming out of the oven was like banana bread on a cold winter day. It made me nauseous and drove me into the living room. I dropped to the futon and caught a glimpse of the pile of papers that was my roommate's collection of short stories. I had told him that I would read them over the break. Steve's a nice guy, and I just can't stop lying to him. I tiptoed to the bathroom door. I had thought that Steve's girlfriend was going to puke, but based on the sounds I was hearing, something different was happening. I knocked on the door frame. Are you all right? Can you get me a glass of water? There aren't any clean glasses. Can you wash one? We don't have any dish soap. Can you just bring me the Brita? Why can't you just drink from the bathroom sink? The bathroom sink gave only freezing cold water. The water tastes like rust. But it won't matter if it already stinks in there. Get me the goddamn Brita! I went back to the kitchen and shut off the oven. I used a wad of Subway napkins to take out the cookie sheet. The banana peels looked like pieces of shit from 2-dimensional animals. I was irritated, so I opened the fridge with more force than was needed. Something flew out from the door shelf. It was a baggie of organic whole nutmegs. This other TA had given them to me, saying that if you ground them and snorted them, you would start tripping. I never knew him well. He was fired a month into the semester for keeping rescued cats in the basement of the philosophy building. I need that Brita, the girlfriend yelled. I'm coming. I brought over the pitcher and knocked on the door frame. She opened the door and, hey, she still looked pretty decent. Listen, I just found... She snatched the Brita and slammed the door in my face. I went back to the kitchen. I grabbed the steak knife and chopped away at one of the nutmegs on the counter. At the very least, it helped to counteract the banana smell. I cut and cut again, trying to make the smallest particles possible. I began to think about my dreams, hopes, and desires all being pulverized into microscopic particles. I was a smart motherfucker at a smart school. And yet, I was too poor to fly out to see the people who hated my life decisions and hated me. When the nutmeg pieces looked small enough, I braced myself on the counter, bent over, and sucked the pile up into my nose. I felt a rush immediately. Whoa, that was working fast. Some dry nutmeg pieces jammed in the back of my nasal cavity and tickled my throat. I began coughing. I tried to blow my nose to get rid of the discomfort, and the Subway napkins came away from my face wet. Both nostrils were bleeding profusely. I pinched my nose and sprinted to the bathroom. Hey, hey, I need the cold water from the sink. I have a bloody nose. I heard her shift on the toilet seat. Go use the kitchen sink. It has only hot water. It'll open up the capillaries and make it even worse. You're not coming in here. Please. No. I'm all fucked up in here thanks to you. I toyed with the doorknob. If you come in here, I'll piss on you. It was now 12:30 in the morning. Everything had changed in only 30 minutes. I had trouble calming down, and now the napkin was soaked. Blood was splattered on the walls and the floor. I punched my arms through my jacket and went outside. By the time I got to the law building, the bleeding had stopped. I used a coat hanger to pick my way into the faculty lounge. I drank some orange juice from the fridge and lay down for the night on the leather couch. I would have to get up early in the morning to clean up the apartment a bit. Steve was going to be back, and I wanted to make sure there wasn't a half-naked woman passed out on the couch this year. He's the nicest guy in the world, and he believed my bullshit story about his sister, but there was no way I could come up with something about his girlfriend. Thank you.
This is more of like a, thank you. Excellent. This is more like a prose piece, or why do we have to define things, right? The Asian American, never mind. Okay. Dear India, like all tragic love stories, I never left you because I was never yours. When white people ask where I'm from and I say I was born here, they say, no, really, like, where are you from? And I know what they're asking is, why are you brown? Dear India, you can claim my culture or whatever and my last name, but baby, I spent all my nights in America and my heart will never be yours. Dear India, I used to hate you growing up because I just wanted to be normal and I never knew what normal was because all the other kids were white. And when I was 8, I went to a friend's house and I almost cried because I had no clue what pot roast was, and I still kind of don't. The day Kurt Cobain shot himself, I cried listening to Jesus Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam. I memorized the words to Jack Kerouac. So in America, when the sun goes down and I sit on the old broken down river pier and I stare at all that raw land moving in one huge unbelievable bulge to the west coast and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it, and I think of Iowa and all the children that are crying when the land where they let the children cry, and don't you know God is Pooh Bear? Dear India, I'm sorry when I was 6, I said it was dumb to think a cow was God. Dear India, I learned about karma from a white girl with dreads who was tripping balls. Dear India, I'm not proud to be an American, or at least I know I'm free, but I'm not proud to be Indian because how can you be proud of something you have no control over? Dear India, you're like an ex-boyfriend I'm embarrassed that I slept with, and I can't ever forget because anyone who will ever meet me will know. Dear India, why do you have to make it so freaking hard to like you? Why do you have to make it a crime to be gay? You're not even Christian. There are like a million gods there. And why can't you have any social welfare for the millions of starving children when you do have a thriving middle class? And why are your gods have like 9 hands and they look like they're gonna give hand jobs? I was gonna cross that out. Okay. Sorry about that. It's just when you're in prayer, it's like, you know, you have to stare at whatever, you're imagining, whatever. I saw Dear India, I saw the Taj Mahal being polished while across the street naked children played in the garbage. I saw businessmen yell at a little girl begging for food. I saw the sun rise over cobbled streets and a stunning woman walk down the street and it looked like the cover of Vogue. I saw construction workers who didn't wear helmets and climb the scaffolding barefoot. When the car broke down, the mechanic repaired it using a bunch of random things like a piece of chewing gum, like MacGyver. The weather was gray, but all the people dressed in brilliant colors, and I wondered if psychologically, if the mind, if you live in a dismal place and there's no weather naturally, if the mind has to produce it artificially. In America, they ask me where I'm from. In India, they charge me American prices. The American dream Indians come here for is to work hard so their kids can become doctors. And if you want to be an artist, you're not just a huge normal disappointment, but a poor investment. No one would uproot their lives and pay 30 or 50 grand a year just so their kid could sit around a room and, quote, play with words or whatever it is you do. Nobody wants to hear, Mom, I want to be a writer. It's like saying, hey, everything you worked for was kind of a waste, but I'm chasing my dreams, which are all about me, because I'm a unique, special snowflake, just like everyone else. By the way, can you put more money in my account? They resign my existence with someone who is mentally ill or not able to conceive of the concept that money is traded for goods and services. When is following your dream being selfish? Should you just suck it up and make the most money you can? Because at some point when you're old enough, you realize it was kind of dumb to think your life is your own when your whole life has been surrounded by others. The day my novel came out, no one in my family congratulated me. They equated money with success, but there was no money, like there was no money. And there were no calls or texts or messages or money, like there was no money. And my best friend's dad called me, who took me to a Denny's once, and he told me about on PBS he saw this special in India and how they had this rat temple, and I was trying to eat, so it was kind of gross, but he was super awesome on the phone and supportive, and I was like, man, if I had an American dad, like, it would be different, you know? Dear India, you may have Gandhi on the wall of your post office, but I've heard you openly talk about how Muslims beat their wives. If you're a divorced woman, no one wants you, even though you have no idea what happened. Your marriages are arranged like bank loans, and even if the wife is a doctor or an accountant, she still is the one who does all the cooking and cleaning. It's like the 1950s, except the TVs are flat and there's memory foam. Dear India, I'm sorry you have to be mixed up with me. I know you would cut the ties if it was up to you. I'm sorry that people worked hard to give me opportunities that I don't want. Dear India, I wish I could be better. I wish I thought it was as fascinating to be Indian as a middle-aged white woman who compliments my thick, dark hair and my exotic looks as she holds her Jhumpa Lahiri book and talks about beautiful saris and exotic spices. But that's not the India I know. I wish I felt something special when I heard your name instead of just still images of National Geographic and those kids with the flies around them, and then you get sad. I don't want to hate you, and I don't want to exploit you, and I feel guilty for not feeling bad enough that I don't know how to care about you. I wish I could wash you off me in a monsoon. Dear India, you made me sick when I was a kid, like really sick. I had dysentery. And I remember running to the bathroom and not knowing whether to shit on the wall and puke in the toilet or to puke on the wall and shit in the toilet. And that's how I feel every time I think about how Trump is president. and I want to hide in your Himalayas because suddenly I'm more connected to you more than ever. Like my skin color means I have a political agenda all the time. Like white people can tweet and then just go about their day. In The Adventures of Huck Finn, there's a part where Finn realizes that if he doesn't turn Jim in, he'll go to hell forever. He decides that he'll still let Jim be free, even though he's doomed for eternal hell forever and ever. He's still like, I can't do it. I can't turn my friend in. And that's this Emersonian notion of self-reliance, to think what I think is good, even though it doesn't agree with social norms, is good. And for me, that's what America means. That's what I appreciate, because in other countries, it's all about upholding conformity and social norms. India, I know Martin Luther King's, and that's why the most effective political act is to tell the truth. So try to tell the truth. India, I know Martin Luther King's dream came from Gandhi's teaching, but your history is something I read about on Wikipedia when I had to go there, and again on Wikipedia before I wrote this. But when I hear Martin Luther King's speech, or I hear Larry Flint say, well, sue God for making pussy, because I only took pictures of it, or when I see the grainy footage, One Small Step for Mankind, or when I watch dogs attack the peaceful marches during the civil rights movement, or Bob Dylan's voice, I think that's my history. When the pilot in his Midwestern voice says, welcome to New York City, JFK, I think that's my home. That's my fucked up home too.
Thank you so much, Ed and Jade. So next, I guess I'll introduce Lisa and Zohra, and Zohra will do a much better intro of Lisa. So as you know, Lisa is the author of The Leavers, which is published by Algonquin, and it's a story of Deming Guo and his mother, Polly, who's an undocumented Chinese immigrant. And through that story, it's sort of a very layered, loveful story about being separated from your family and where you end up and what it means to be an aimless Asian American. Ms. Magazine says, the story soars when Coe writes of immigration detention, a civil detention for violation of a civil law that is as bad as the worst sort of criminal incarceration. But as you'll see, the book is about much more than that, and we have a special slide presentation here tonight. And Lisa's worn a number of different hats, from being a fiction editor at Drunken Boat, one of the co-founders of Hyphen, as well as a old relationship with the Asian American Writers Workshop, where she was one of our Van Leer Fellows and one of the editors of 10, which was our member magazine many years ago. So introducing her will be Zohra Saed, who's done many events with us before. And she's the editor of One Story, 30 Stories, which is the first Afghan-American literary anthology, and one of the co-founders of Brooklyn Upset Press. So let's give Zohra a hand.
Okay, the real reason why I'm here is because I met Lisa back when I was an intern at the Asian American Writers Workshop, the basement, just as hot, of the Gap. Is it the Gap? It was something. We were on those stairwells a lot. So I went in, and the first person who opened the door for me was Lisa, and I was like, oh, what a great internship. She's so cool. Da-da-da. She's like, I was like, oh, I'm here for the interview. Da-da-da. I was being all nervous and 19 and whatever. And she's like, no, I just got here 10 minutes before you. I'm an intern too. So we've been, so we ended up hanging out that whole time. I can't remember anything else I learned except that I really loved Lisa and that we chain smoked a lot. And we did a lot of unhealthy things, and it was really hot all the time for some reason. I guess because it was summer and there was no air conditioning. And then I just saw Andrea, who's just said that there were rats in the little discard things because we're in the basement. But I want to introduce Lisa because, then again, it lasted beyond chain smoking and stairwells and talking shit about people and thinking people are cute and whatever we did in that internship. I had a curfew, so she would read my poetry at the open mic, so I never got to meet anyone else. But I was a good Muslim girl. So what ended up becoming a very long friendship, and later, 7 years later, we'd meet again doing yoga, taking long walks, and drinking green veggie juice. So I want to say that this novel, for me, is a lot of the attitude, the refreshing language, and the stepping away from a kind of literature that is, it was what I identified early Asian American writings with, which is a lot of explaining one's culture, explaining how one fit in, and then kind of using the kitchen as a place to mash up your identities. And I think it's much more bold, independent, and cut away from everything. And I think that's what makes her voice such an important thing. Now that I'm a scholar, I'm trying not to tone down the academic, but I'm really excited about teaching her work as well. And I want you all to welcome Lisa, who'll be reading from one of her most underachieving chapters in her novel, and then we'll have a discussion, and then I'll invite you to talk to her as well. Right? Okay, Lisa.
Hey everyone. I came from work, so I'm wearing my work outfit. Oh my god. So this is a Snuggie. It's a wearable blanket. It's like an underachiever uniform. Because it's like you can always be in bed, even if you're standing up at the Asian American Writers Workshop. It's also really hot. I also think this is meant for a much taller person, because it's like a Swiffer as well. Anyway, it's so great to be here. The workshop and I go way back. I was going to mention, too, that I was an intern there in '96 where Zohra Saed and I did a lot of smoking in a stairwell. We also looked like we were 12, even though we were 20, so, like, kind of disturbed people. And the workshop has been, like, just really influential in my writing. It was where I did my first reading that summer, published my first short story in the APA Journal, got, really great encouragement from other writers at a time that I really needed it. So it feels really special to be doing this reading here. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to Ed and Jade for reading with me. It's so awesome to be reading with you guys. Thank you to my dear friend Zohra, who's brilliant and funny as hell. So I was thinking a lot about the name of this event, White People and Asian Dropouts, and a lot of the language that was used in the description. Rebels, underachievers, model minorities. I think loser was one, or that might just be Ed who brought up loser. I don't know. But I put together a little slideshow, too, of images that may be, kind of inspirational and get us in the mood. I'm not saying that these people are all underachievers by any means. A lot of them might just kind of go against the grain, and some of them are me, so you can also make your own conclusions. But yeah, so I think kind of like Ed said, to be an Asian dropout, I don't think we're necessarily just talking about dropping out of school. People drop out of school for many reasons, some by choice, some by not. And it's really, I think what we're talking about is dropping out of kind of the expectations, right? Which is what the characters do in my novel. And those expectations can be like social, model minority myth, familial expectations. A lot of time that's sort of this middle class, professional trajectory. And that's not to say that all Asian American experiences are alike either, but feels good to kind of give the middle finger and defy expectations, whatever that means for you, even if we sort of toe the line at it. I mean, Harold and Kumar still had their day jobs. So my protagonist in The Leavers is named Daniel Wilkinson. He's definitely an Asian underachiever and a fuck up. He's sort of a hot mess. Those are kind of the characters I love reading about. And he's he's dropped out of college. He's deeply in debt. He drinks too much. He's a musician who's permanently crashing on his friend's couch. What else? Who's got addiction issues, just a lot of problems. And it's not only because he's an adoptee or that he's got an immigrant mom or that he's Chinese American, but more that he's just gone through a lot of shit. When he's 11 years old, his mom goes to work one day and she never comes home. He never knows what happens to her. Eventually, he gets fostered and then adopted by these white professors who are sort of like LL Bean white tiger parents. And they move him from the city to their small town upstate. He's like the only Asian kid there, and they just really want him to succeed in school, and that's just not his thing. So he's kind of torn between feeling really guilty about it and then also feeling really resentful about it, which is kind of what happens. So I'll just read a few pages from chapter 2. In this chapter, Daniel's 21. He's recently moved back to New York City from upstate, and he's playing in a band, and this is the night of their first show. Daniel Wilkinson stood in a corner, hoping no one would notice his shoes. They were insulated hiking boots, clunkers with forest green accents, necessary armor for upstate winters, but aesthetic insult in the city. With his Gore-Tex coat, wool hat, and puffy gloves stashed in a back room with his guitar, a butterscotch Strat he'd bought off of Craigslist, his jeans and black t-shirt didn't seem to be too blatantly suburban, yet the other guy's feet were clad in stark white sneakers or dark leather boots. And the old fear bucked up, that he'd be exposed, called out, exiled. You're a fake. What's your real name? Where are you really from? The show is in a loft apartment on the last remaining industrial block in Lower Manhattan. Windows lined one wall, edged with late February frost, and the concrete floor was tacky with spilled drinks. Closer to where the bands played, it was as hot as July. The current act, math rockers whose set sounded like one 30-minute-long song, dull grays and feeble angles, the singer's head shaved bald around the sides, while the hair on top sprouted up like a fistful of licorice, reminded Daniel of being stoned for days in his dorm room at SUNY Potsdam, hitting repeat on the same song until the notes separated and unraveled. Thank God he was no longer at Potsdam. He drank vodka in his plastic cup, let the warmth spread into his belly, sandpapering his nerves until the music soaked down to his toes. When he and Roland played, the audience would be incredulous, admiring. Not like earlier, when this dude Nate had been talking about Vic Zero and Daniel had blurted, "Oh, you mean the blue backpack guy?" And Nate had made a face like he noticed a stain on his pants. "Oh, you mean the blue backpack guy?" Daniel mentally punched himself. Nate was so tall and skinny he had a premature hunchback, and his long, thin face was giraffe adjacent. But even he thought Daniel was a loser. After tonight, no one would turn away from him in the middle of a conversation or look over him like he was invisible. The band would play sold-out shows, be profiled on music blogs, his picture front and center. Roland had been telling people that this new project was his best yet, reunited with his original collaborator, with Daniel's insane guitar. Hearing this made Daniel nervous, like they were tempting fate. He poured himself another vodka, downed it, poured another. He wandered out to the rooftop, the city spread wide like an offering, though he knew better than to admit he was impressed by the view. Upstate, snow was everywhere, the season in deep coma. Yet in the city, there was minimal snow. Heat lamps on the roof and bridges in the distance lit up like X-rays. And there was music, wordless and thumping, bulbs of gold and green, and dancing, arms and legs moving in slow motion, like animals stalking their prey. There were girls with geometric tattoos up the insides of their forearms, hair bundled up like snakes, eyeliner packed on so thick it looked like it had been applied with a Sharpie. One of them had played a set earlier, creeping yowls and crashing keyboards, violin, theremin, melodica, each instrument creepier than the next. Daniel glanced at his hiking boots and moved toward the eye of the dancing, the music an underwater dream. Years before these transplants dared to venture out of their suburban hometowns, Daniel had been a city kid who memorized the subway system by 4th grade. Yet he still felt like he didn't belong. Post-Ridgeboro, it had never been easy for Daniel to trust himself. Not like Roland, who could give a party direction simply by showing up. When Roland asked if anyone wanted to eat at Taco Bell, which would elicit silence or even derision if anyone else suggested it, people said, sure, cool. If Roland proclaimed the show boring, people agreed to bounce. Daniel was malleable, everyone and no one, a collector of moods, a careful observer of the right thing to say. He watched other people's reactions before deciding on his own. He could be fun or serious or whatever was most strategic, whoever you wanted him to be. Sometimes it backfired, like when he'd overheard these guys talking about a band named Crudités and said, yeah, I've heard of them, 90s pop punk, right? And one of them had said, it's not a real band. How quickly he'd stammered, he must have misheard. If only he had the right clothes, knew the right references, he would finally become the person he was meant to be. Like Roland, self-assured with impeccable taste, but less vain. Deserving of love, blameless. But no matter how many albums he acquired, or playlists he artfully compiled, the real him remained stubbornly out there like a fat cruise ship on the horizon, visible but out of reach. And whenever he got closer, it drifted farther away. He was forever waiting to get past the secret entrance, and when the ropes did part, he could never fully believe he was in. Another door materialized, another rope to get past, always the promise of something better. Thanks. Are we going to sit up here?
Rich.
Oh, you don't want to join me?
Oh, I have to sit with you. Can I share your Snuggie? Yeah. I don't know, and I feel like I need a Snuggie too. All right. So, Lisa. So, do you want to start the slideshow?
Oh, yeah. I didn't
Let's
realize
do-
it wasn't playing.
We have a slideshow.
We have a slideshow of some people that may or may not be underachievers and rebels.
Ah.
It's just going to go on a loop, so you can.
It'll just be over us as we have a conversation. So, there's a scene in your book, well, many, well, there's a part in your book where there's a game that's being played, right? A little scavenger hunt game,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, I'm not that smart to come up with a scavenger hunt game, but I came up with a different game.
Okay.
So I have some people in the audience who are going to talk to you,
Okay.
read to you parts of the book, because I feel
Okay.
like I want more of the book.
Okay.
So can we have Tiffany, master of the squid people, read it first? Or share something? It may be a
Hi.
game.
Hi, Tiffany.
So I'm going to read this passage real quick. Full of omelet, Deming fidgeted in the pews of St. Anne's. The collared striped shirt, a hand-me-down from a nephew of Kay's, made his neck itch. Stand, sit, pray. The priest droned on, and Deming gripped the blue button from his mother's box. He had found it inside a pair of shorts Vivian had packed. Now he slept with it under his pillow. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the blue button.
So the blue button is an object that. So the novel is actually a dual narrative. We follow both Deming's story and his mom Polly's story throughout the book. We see them both before and after their separation and kind of find out how it affects them. And the blue button is actually something that Polly had from her own mother, who died when she was very young. She doesn't actually have any memory of her mom. So back in China, she has that blue button and she ends up holding on to it. She brings it to New York. And later when she disappears, Deming ends up bringing that blue button with him to his new home with his new adoptive parents, and sort of, it's like a thread of continuity with the family that he holds on to.
So despite all the humor of the book, and I'm referring to a section on milk farts, on dairy issues, I think that perhaps the most important part in the book is also the emotions and the amount of crying I did while reading this book. So I wanted to bring out a few more scenes. Okay, Diana, do you want to read? Since we also have a theme of white people, we can't omit white people in this discussion, so come on.
Okay. Was it hard, she asked, being in China? He removed the oven mitt. It took a while for my Chinese to come back, but once it did, it got a lot easier. But still, it must have been pretty foreign for you. He didn't know why, but he didn't want to tell Kay about how he had always felt a little different there, even if he could speak the language. Fuzhou is a big city, though, real modern. Can you expand on that, Lisa?
Sure. That's actually a scene between Deming, or Daniel, and his adoptive mother, Kay. And I think it's sort of representative of his relationship with them. And in writing the book, I was really conscious that I wanted to center my Chinese American characters' experiences and not really do much explaining and just be kind of authentic to what I felt like it was like for my characters, even as fictional characters. So in that scene, he's sort of not wanting to tell his mom something that he learned about his birth mother. He wants to keep it to himself. And to me, it feels real. It feels real in that way that you don't want to kind of give away your secrets and you don't know how they're going to be construed. And it speaks to that sort of anxiety. Yeah.
And can you, since we're following that thread, can you tell us about the how, I mean, obviously we talk about post readings, but how has how have white audiences responded to your work?
I feel like there's been a lot of really differing opinions about my work from both white and Asian audiences. There are other audiences besides those two groups, obviously, but it's definitely a different feeling to like kind of read in all white space versus a space that's mostly Asian American or mostly POC. And yeah, I feel sometimes that white people get a little defensive and feel upset that I've kind of called them out, which is fine.
So we have one more scene, and that's, can I have the Tiffany?
Hi.
Hi.
Angel held up a small pink iPod and white headphones. Want to listen? They each took an earbud and sat on the floor. Music swelled into Dumming's right ear, a tinny electronic drum beat, and a woman singing crunchy, processed vocals. Angel bobbed her chin. When's your birthday? November 8th. I don't have a real birthday because I'm adopted, but we decided that my birthday could be March 15. When's your gotcha day? What's gotcha day?
What's Gotcha Day?
Gotcha Day in the book is the day that Angel, who's another Chinese adoptee, comes home with her parents from China. Yeah. And they receive a going home Barbie, which is actually a Barbie that exists in real life. That's a white Barbie with a small Chinese-looking baby that they give away in orphanages in China.
So what have been your favorite response? I mean, or from the book itself, considering, I mean, it is about an underachieving Asian. Is there, I just want to know, what has been some of the favorite responses to this?
I think it's been really meaningful for me to get responses from people who see themselves in the book. Like, I think that's sort of who I write for. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, I just feel really amazing when that happens. I actually had somebody, another writer write to me and say, it really surprises me this got published. You know, not in a bad way, but it was more like because she said, like, because I took on white supremacy in a way that made her surprised that it would get published in a mainstream way. And
Yeah.
I felt really happy about that.
Well, I think that leads to the process of getting this story published, right? Because it wasn't the typical story by an Asian American. So can you talk about that process? I'm really hot. I feel really sleepy.
I know, it's
in
really
this.
hot. It's really hot.
So I'm like, all my questions are getting really slow. You're bringing the sleep, girl.
That's what it's for.
All right. I'm going to go sit on my red couch.
Okay.
My red chair.
God.
Jeez.
Damn.
Hot, I got sleepy, I got boring.
Is this something I did?
No.
Wait, what's the question?
I forgot.
Okay.
So tell me about the struggle, because I remember. Okay, so let's just. I feel like I'm fishing for an answer that I already.
Yeah. What do you want me to say?
Well, basically, I want you to say. Remember those people who were reviewing and kind of giving you feedback to the manuscript, and you were like, "They're such jerks. What the hell's wrong?"
Wait,
with
which
them?
people am I? Which people?
Well, remember we did that round. Oh, you went to that roundabout, and you were meeting agents. And they said we can't sell this story. Can you just tell me about that? I mean, I can't dress it up. It just feels so fake, and then I'm hot.
I think. Oh yeah, I think an agent did tell me that immigrant stories were over. Yeah, that was quite a few years ago. I was in a really bad place then, and I was just like, I think I'll just go home and give up.
Yeah, I remember
bother. That. Yeah,
and
it's
how
so
many?
depressing.
And how long did it take? I mean, I know how long it took. We were crying about it on Brighton Beach. I remember.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it took 7 years for the novel to be written and published.
I know way too much about you to do this interview. This is so terrible. Okay, so remember when I was crying that my dissertation would never be done?
Yeah, and then you just
crying?
finished it.
Yeah, and I just
like
finished
last
it too.
week. Yeah.
So thank you for letting me ride that productivity. Apparently, I follow you because I followed your sleepy snuggy thing. But can you talk about like that moment when? Okay, so you had this manuscript, and I know you were upset. We were at that stupid vegan restaurant, and you were saying, I was saying, I can't believe I'm teaching high school. This is terrible. And then, oh my God, is that going to be on? Wait,
it's being live streamed.
I love teaching in high school.
Yeah. To your school.
And then you were like, no, this novel is never going to get done. I love that moment because now it's done. This is why I get so excited when I see you. But what is it about that particular? How did you feel like getting Barbara Kingsolver's letter? And I love that moment. Can you tell that story again?
Sure. It felt really surreal because I entered this Penn Bellwether Prize and sort of forgot about it. And then about 6 months later, I'd lost my phone, and I came back and I found an email from Barbara Kingsolver saying, "We've been trying to reach you all week. Where are you?" And I finally got in touch with her, and she was like, "You won." And I was just sort of shell-shocked. It didn't really feel real. It still doesn't really feel real.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. Shit. Well, I love that story because you were doubting the manuscript, and then you said, "No, I'm going to hold on to it." Yes. And then you did that. And I love that perseverance because that was hard. That was hard. So I think that's a good inspirational thing for all writers, right? So what made you not give up on Daniel, on Deming, on Polly?
It was actually, it was this quote that I read by this author, Matthew Thomas, who said something along the lines of, he'd worked on his novel for 10 years, We Are Not Ourselves. And he said something like, basically he said, I would regret giving up more than the considerable pain of actually having to write. And so it was this sort of idea of weighing, like as a glass half empty person, it was really helpful for me to see like, what would I regret more, giving up or going through the process of having to rewrite the novel again? And so I realized I would regret giving up more.
That's what I want.
And that helped.
That feels more natural. That feels like our conversations. So do you have questions? How much time do we have? Do we have questions in the audience? Do you want to ask her something? Do you want us to keep talking? Because we could go on for a long time. We are very good at this. Well, so as you're thinking of a question, I will be thinking about, the last reading we did, last launch in Brooklyn, there's one question that I thought was really interesting. People are really concerned about Polly being, perhaps not feeling enough, or I don't know. There was all these questions and concerns about Polly. I thought the book was mostly about Deming, and I felt saw everything through his eyes. And of course, it's a much more intimate story when Polly's telling her story.
Right, it's in first person.
It's first person. So it's definitely there. But I have I have an abandoned mother story. So when I read it, for me, it felt very real and not sort of put up in all of these sort of overly melancholic Anna Karenina or like Madame Bovary kind of type heaviness. So can you talk maybe more about, without giving things away, the resistance to this mother, and then why you chose or what led you to write her in that way?
Yeah, it's interesting because Polly's a bit of like a reluctant mom, but she gets a lot of pushback from readers. Some people feel really angry at her, that she's very selfish, that she's kind of a bad person. And it always kind of surprises me because to me she feels real. Like to me her reluctance and her humanity is like, some of that comes from my own emotions. And then I'm like, wow, what does that say about me? But I do think it really brings up a lot of questions, especially about like female characters. A lot of the critique is like, well, I don't like these characters and I don't want to read about them. And so to me, I'm just always kind of like, like what does that say about us as readers, and that we want likable characters, and what does that say about why we read, what we want out of our reading?
Right. And what about the other mother, Kay? how have people responded to Kay, who is the white adopted mother?
Yeah,
And
she
it-
also gets also like both love and hate. Yeah, for many different reasons as well.
And what is it? What is it? What is the resistance to Kay? Well, I'm just thinking of the audience. I was thinking of that night. I'm thinking of also others seeing a novel that has have white characters as marginal figures, not really as central.
Right.
So I'm wondering I mean, the reviews are in Ms. Magazine, are in New York Times. I'm just curious about, and in Washington Journal?
I don't know.
I forget the newspaper. Whatever, those things out there. Washington Post?
Not yet.
Washington? No. Okay. Whatever. So, but what is? Tell me, how have people responded to Kay? Do they see themselves in Kay? Do they feel like they don't want to be part of that?
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think
marginalization?
some people like her and some people don't. I don't know. That might speak to people themselves and where they're at. You know.
Well, I think also that I think I'm also thinking specifically about friends who have read it who are seeing for the first time a white family who's done this great, sort of thing of adopting a child, but they're uncomfortable not seeing that rewarded and not seeing
Right.
more of a sympathetic or more story for them. It just remained
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah,
I
it's a
think-
very
yeah.
specific kind of like liberal racism, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
where they're liberal and they vote Democrat and
They're
they
like,
eat organic
yeah.
food, but at the same time they feel very kind of uncomfortable thinking
Right.
about their own investment with racism and white supremacy.
Yeah, because there
That's the
is.
thing.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna leave it open for you guys. Do you want to ask a question? Do I see a question? Yes.
I saw hands. Where?
Yay!
I know you.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey there.
So I have a question for you, Lisa.
Okay.
So you were talking about how reviewers have had, some reviewers have had a very visceral reaction to Polly, right? And I'm actually in the middle of chapter 2, so I'm just dipping my toes into kind of really soaking in Polly and loving her.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking about is, I think in a lot of ways, this event is interesting to think about in that, as Asian Americans are trying to push back on stereotypes, and that this event is kind of having us think around or wrap our heads around what it means to be a dropout. I wanted to ask you what it was like to balance the danger of kind of creating a character that is so resistant to a stereotype, not feeling contrived, right? So then not feeling like the pendulum is swinging so far that then Polly becomes this symbol of resisting and being a dropout, and then it not feeling real. Because I already get the sense that there's just such a subtlety and a balance to it, and I just wanted to know what your process was like as a writer in thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I was thinking too with this event, like, even like if we talk about rebels or dropouts and that kind of thing, like, aren't we in some ways like defining ourselves by what we're not? And by doing that, are we not still centering, kind of model minority stereotype, right? So yeah, I think that's a really good point. I definitely went through many drafts of writing the characters. Ones where Polly in the beginning was sort of this, like she was a flat victim. Like a lot of terrible things happened to her. She had very little agency. And that didn't work, So it was like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And I did another draft where she was like this terrible person, like this like terrible villain, like this monstrous woman. And like that didn't work either. So it was kind of just like trial and error and trying to figure out what did make sense, given the character's journey, given the rest of her world, and sort of taking some out and putting more in and trying to find the right fit.
And just a little follow-up. In your opinion, if in a few words you could describe kind of after that process what Polly became for you, what would you say?
Huh. What do you mean? What
Or
she
like
became?
how you would describe her, I should say, yeah.
How should I describe her?
Yeah.
Well, I think she's definitely kind of a rebel and a badass. Like she's the first girl in her village to move to the big city. And there's a way that, like most girls and women, she she experiences a lot of sexism, right? She's got this kind of macho dad. Maybe a lot of us can relate. And so she grows up sort of trying to push back against those expectations, and that sort of takes her to the US. So she's both a product of the community and the culture where she lives, and also kind of just the world, right? And she has to sort of balance that with being a mom, because being a mom is so loaded with all these other expectations as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Another question? No? You're all shy?
All right.
Thank you. So a lot of, now that you're a veteran, having
Andrea.
published a, hey, that's really great.
Andrea used to be the publications director of the Asian American
I
Writers
know,
Workshop.
and you were the 10 magazine editor, which is so great. I was thinking I'm probably like at least twice everyone's age in here put together.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh no, because anyway, we won't bore anyone with who's older. But my question to you is that a lot of times writers will find themselves asking the same question over and over again, and I know that you're working on another manuscript now and exploring different ideas, and I wondered whether you were encountering different questions or the same question.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny. I think that's definitely true. I think we have our obsessions and we sort of never get over them, and maybe it's just like our childhood pain or something. Like, you know, like I feel like I've definitely, like, before I wrote The Leavers, I was basically trying to write the same short story for 10 years, even though it took the guise of many, many, many short stories, but it was sort of the same story. And I kept trying to figure it out. But I think that, yeah, you know, even though this new novel I'm working on has absolutely nothing in common with The Leavers, I think there are definitely stories that I'm still attracted to. One's about belonging, and one's about underdogs and misfits, and those are things that I'm always drawn to for many reasons in both my writing and reading.
Hi, how are
Hi,
you?
good.
So my question is less about like the content of the book and just as an Asian American writer. So my parents are immigrants and don't speak English, and one of like my biggest things about writing is a lot of it is about like family history, but like sadness is not even the right word, but the fact that unless someone like translates it perfectly, my parents won't be able to read the story. And wondering if you have the same experience, yeah, and how you deal or cope with that. And I guess follow-up question.
Yeah.
Unlike, I'm sorry, I forgot your Jade. Yeah. Did your parents or did your family congratulate you on your book and things like that?
Please cue Instagram.
Yeah. I have a different experience where my parents are fluent in English, so they can read everything. And, you know, sometimes I kind of wonder maybe it would be better if they weren't, because I don't want them to read everything. And so, yeah, they've been definitely kind of like, my dad's on Facebook, and now he's my friend, and I got to filter him out, and, like, I hope he doesn't see this. So, you know, I kind of have to deal with this. I'm an only child, and sometimes my mom calls me, and she's like, I read that essay you wrote. You made me look bad. I'm like, sorry. But, you know, I've kind of dealt with it by just trying to not think about it at all, and until it's too late, and, you know, what are you going to do? But, yeah, my parents were very supportive when it came out, I think mostly because there was some sort of external validation in getting a book published. I think for the many, many years before that, it was very hard for them to understand why I would want to do this, and also why it was taking so long. Anyone else?
What's that question here? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you just talk more about the images and what you want to show through these?
You can stop the images if you want. Oh, that's me giving my middle finger with, just turn it off.
Is it that these images exist, but we may not be as familiar with them, or
yeah, I started thinking of like, you know, if I was going to add, because Tracy emailed and was like, if anyone wants to add a multimedia component, feel free. And I was like, oh, maybe I should add a multimedia component because he wants to watch me in a Snuggie. So, you know, then I was like, what kind of images come to mind when you say things like Asian American rebels and underachievers and dropouts. And I know that the social media image for this event was the Better Luck Tomorrow screenshot. So I just sort of kind of like did some Googling and it kind of took me to some places. First, I was gonna like just put a bunch of really embarrassing photos of myself up there, of me being like drunk and whatever. But I didn't have that many because, fortunately, I'm
90s
not a millennial.
photographed.
So there's not much evidence. Yeah, and so it just kind of got me thinking more about, who are some of these cultural figures that, even though they're very successful and definitely are overachievers in many ways, like cultivate a certain image of being rebellious. What does that mean? And yeah, I just thought it was kind of an interesting jumping point to looking and thinking about that.
Is that good? Should we have one more and then everyone signs and gets their book signed and talks to her individually and can get all your advice? Is there any secrets to what should we any secrets you want to dig into or
No secrets.
I was going to bring in actually a photo of us doing henna in our hair with the garbage bags
I should've brought that
around
in.
our
Sorry.
heads
Next time.
and our cat faces, but we got underachieving Asians instead. Is there another question? Are you a writer? Do you want advice? Do you feel
I saw a hand.
yeah, I saw one. Yeah. Just pick on someone anyway.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa. So reading a bio, I know that you grew up. You always knew you wanted to write, and you were very clear what you were interested in. But since you had Asian parents, did they ever was there that tension that you kind of mentioned in the book, between you and them, and following your dreams and actually making your parents proud, all that?
Yes.
Were you a rebel?
I was a rebel, but I was too scared to be that much of a rebel. I still feel a lot of first-generation American guilt sometimes, and it's a struggle. I feel like it's never going to go away. There's a lot about your parents come to this country and work really hard, and then you become this underachieving writer who takes 7 years to write a book. And so a lot of the struggle around my process of writing was trying to be can I value my writing enough? Can I actually claim that for myself as something I want, even though it's not something that's this career path that I should be on? Can I make those choices and feel okay with them? Yes.
I want to comment, unlike you, I'm not an only child, so my brother, he was a perfect contrast to the perfect Indian child, and was extremely academic and went to UVA even though he got into Cornell because it was cheaper. I've heard that a million times. I'm you should have just gone to freaking Cornell. That was a bad call on you. You just whine and you get your way. Anyway, my point is so he was an engineer, and that's very, stereotypical or whatever. Right. So I don't know if I think that might have made it harder because it was he did it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He followed the steps and you know what I mean? So
That's
I think
really
it might help you that you're, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Because all my life I've always wished that I had the older or the sibling who was perfect, because at least my parents would have somewhere to live when they got old, and they'd have grandchildren and blah blah blah. Yeah, and so we take the pressure off me maybe, but it's interesting to hear that it's not necessarily doesn't really work that way either.
Any other questions?
Hi, Lisa. Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I was actually hoping I could ask, do you feel in your writing that at times it can be pulling the scab off of a wound? Because I think the best example would be sometimes when people look at there was a book a while back, it was kind of the opposite, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom. A lot of people said that is a phenomena that happens in Asian communities, but it's something that it's something you want to keep in the family, something as a community that should be discussed within. You don't want to go to white America and say this is how we do things. I want to know what your opinion is. Do you feel that you ever touch on a similar element of sort of disillusionment in your book?
Huh. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like it's so hard. You like, as an Asian American writer, or as a writer of color, because so few of our stories are published. Like it feels impossible to escape that sort of weight of representation, right? Like even if we don't want it, it's there, right? Like our stories are being read in a certain way. They're being read to represent everyone from our group. We don't really have the ability to like be specific, right? So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's a concern that always comes up to me, like how am I doing the right thing? Am I making Asian men look bad? Am I making Asian moms look bad? You know, I mean, I'm an anxious person, so this shit keeps, like, something will keep me up at night, whatever it is. But yeah, it feels like kind of an ongoing thing, you know, trying to think about it and then trying not to think about it. There's only so much you can do about controlling the way people read your books. I don't know if that was really answering your question, but yeah.
Should we do some signings, or should we do that? Okay, I want to just end. Do you have another? Do you have a question? Do you have time? Yeah. Well, we love your questions. It's like student participation in my classes. I'm getting really excited. Yes.
Hi, I'm Alima. So I'm 23 years old, and I mean, I would identify myself as a writer. And I have some questions about the process. So I kind of want to know, like, how do you decide when you feel like you're satisfied with your work? Because, like, I publish some of my work in, like, magazines and stuff, and I just always have a hard time, like, identifying which draft to go with and how I want to portray my characters. Right. And, like, do you ever find yourself, like, wondering how others would perceive your work and then going to change it? Like, how do you answer those questions?
Sure. Yeah, I always wonder how people will perceive my work. I think it's a good thing to wonder that, you know, as writers. I don't know. How do I know when it's done? I mean, I think there are things that are published, and sometimes I look back on them and I can't even read them because I want to edit them. I think that given the ability, I probably edit until I die, like just keep editing and editing and editing. But sometimes when it's published, you just kind of have to let it go because there's nothing you can do about it. It's out there, and you give it to the world and kind of set it free, right?
Well, I want to follow up on that, actually. Since we're in the Asian American Writers Workshop and we all talked about this community and connection between other writers, how do you use, how do you create a community of writers, and then how does that nourish you as an artist?
How do you create a community of writers? Yeah, create community. I mean, just like how you create community in anything else, you know. We live in New York City, so there's a lot of people out there. It's like just finding the right readers for your work, I think, and the people that really understand you and are supportive and not catty and
tell me more. Yes, tell me more, Lisa. Well, you have a really good group of writers who are around you, and they're beautiful. Yep. But tell me more. How do you weed them out? Come on, we got a 23-year-old who's starting to write. We got to help her. Can't let her out there in the world. Catty writers are the worst. But how, you know, what is that? How do you create that? Because I do believe that, you know, it's your friendship. Can I just answer that?
Yeah, I feel like you want to answer this question.
Just answer my own
question.
Just
answer the question.
Well, I think I'm always trying to guide you, and you never listen to anything I'm trying to tell you. I'm giving you the key words. But I think it's your friendship. It's the way Lisa maintains her friendships. And I think that's really important in just a person, a human being, but also I feel like the writers who are drawn to you are writers you've given a lot of love to as well. And you are very nourishing.
It's reciprocal, so.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of. So then, how do you weed out the bad one? How do you weed out the catty ones?
You know, just like how you weed out anybody that you don't want in your life.
I want specific stories, Lisa.
I don't have any specific stories.
Damn it, she's not telling. But yeah, so those communities are from all of the hard work that you do as well, right?
Yeah, and you know, I think just finding specific communities like in life and with your friends and with specific groups of people and classes that you've taken over the years.
Like classes, residencies. All right, whatever. I'm not going to torture her anymore. But I think there's something about Lisa in her dedication to her friendships and her commitment to it that does create this circle around her. And I think you've given me a lot of feedback throughout my life and helped me through a lot. So I'm always happy being here. And I'll never forget that first story you got published in the APA Journal, which was her with a character in the car with this tree with gold leaves trembling. And I just remember reading it and saying, wow, I really feel that nervous person holding on to that dusty gold leaf thing. And I think that's where I always wanted to be friends with you. So it is through your writing, and always. Good work, Lisa. Good work.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. It's great to have you here.
There are books in the back. She's on the couch. Don't share her Snuggie. She'll make you sleep.